Hi class, today's lesson is lesson 4-9, estimating fractions, sums, and differences. Our purpose today is to estimate sums and differences of fractions and mixed numbers. There are no new vocabulary terms for this lesson. We'll go to example 1. Here we have a situation in which we're required to round to 0, 1/2, or 1. We're going to take these fractions and place them in the box. Either they're closer to 0, 1/2, or 1. I'm going to take 5/31 and look at this fraction. First thing I'm going to ask myself is, how far away is the numerator from the denominator? If it's very far away, meaning there's a big difference between the numerator and denominator, it's going to be closer to 0. 5 is definitely very far away from 31. So 5/35 is closer to 0. In fact, how far is it away from 1? Well, it's 26/35 away from 1, so that's a long way. Next, we're going to take 5/12. 5/12 I'm going to place in the near or 1/2 category. Why? Because 6/12 I know is exactly 1/2, so 5/12 is just shy of that 1/2 mark. So I'm going to put it in this box. It's closest to 1/2. 12/23. 12/23 I'm going to place right here in this box. Why? Because I know that 12/24 is exactly half again. So 12/23 is just a little bit over that half mark. So it's going to be closer to 1/2. 12/13. I'm going to put 12/13 closest to 1. Why? Because it's just 1/13 away from 1. And it's 12/13 away from 0. I'm going to place it right here in this box. 5/6. 5/6, just like 12/13, is just a sixth away from 1. So I'm going to place it here. And then finally 1/6. 1/6 is pretty close to 0. That's closer to 0 than it is to 1/2. Why? Because 1 is certainly a further distance away from 6 than any of the other numbers that you can place in the numerator. All right. Moving on to the second example. Now we're going to take those skills that we just learned and we're going to apply them in either looking at sums or differences and estimating those. Here it says to estimate each sum or difference by rounding to 0, 1/2, or 1. First example is 8/9 plus 2/11. 8/9. Where would I put 8/9 on this number line? Well, because 8 is very close to 9, it's going to be near to 1. It's going to be, close to 1. I'm going to go ahead and put 1 right here. And then the addition sign looking at 2/11. Where is that close to? Well, 2/11 is as far as you can in terms of a difference from 11, except 1/11. So it's going to be pretty close to this area over here. What area is that? Well, that's around 0. So when we estimate 8/9 plus 2/11, we're going to be adding essentially 1 and 0, which is 1. So our answer to this is going to be close to 1. It's going to be around 1. Next, we're going to take a look at 7/12 and 8/15. Well, 7/12 is going to be close to 1/2. Why? Well, because 6/12 is exactly 1/2, so 7/12 is somewhere on the other side over here. So we're going to say that's close to 1/2. Then 8/15. 8/15 is going to be close to 1/2 too. And why is that? Because we know that 8/16 is exactly 1/2. So 8/15 is going to be just over the mark. So we're going to call that 1/2 as well. Of course, 1/2 subtract 1/2 is 0, so this answer is going to be close to 0. Finally, we've got small word problems that we're going to be looking at. It says, about how far did the Nature Club ride on Monday and Tuesday? Well, here is a table of the Nature Club's biking distances. It says on Monday they went this far, Tuesday they went this far, etc., etc. How far did the Nature Club ride on Monday and Tuesday? Well, we're going to be looking at Monday here, 10 3/10, and 9 3/4 for Tuesday. So we're going to, obviously, it says about how far, we're going to be totaling those numbers, summing those up. That would be 10 3/10 plus 9 3/4. Well, in this situation, it doesn't really fit on our number line, so we're going to make our number line fit what this is. We have between 10 at this point. We're looking at a number between 10 and 11. So where does 10 3/10 belong on this number line? Well, 3/10 we know is not very close to 1. Is it close to 1? Is it closer to 1/2 or 0? Well, I know that 3/10 is 3/10 away from 0. And 3/10 is actually 2/10 away from 1/2. Because I know 5/10 is right there at 1/2. So I know that 2/10, it's 2/10 away from 1/2 and 3/10 away from, of course, 0. So that tells me it's closer to 1/2. I'm going to write down 10 1/2. And then I'm going to look at this in terms of 9 3/4. I'm going to change the color here. And I'm going to change this because 9 3/4 is somewhere between 9 and 10. Now, where does 3/4 belong on this number line? Well, on this number line, it is exactly right here, 9 3/4. What do we do with that 9 3/4? It's exactly between 1/2 and, I'm sorry, 9 1/2 and 10. It's right here. What do we do? Well, we're going to round up. We're going to say that's going to be closest to 10. So we write down 10 here. What do we get? 10 1/2 plus 10 is going to be 20 1/2. So what we come up with is about 20 1/2 miles that they rode combined on Monday and Tuesday. Lastly, with that same sort of strategy that we're using, about how much farther did the Nature Club ride on Wednesday than on Thursday? So they rode further on Wednesday than they did Thursday, so we're going to find out how far that is. That means that we're going to figure out a difference. Adjust this number line. 12 1/4 is somewhere between 12 and 13. So where does 1/4 go? Well, look, 12 1/4 is right smack in the middle between 12 and 12 1/2. So we're going to round that up. I'm going to round that up to 12 1/2. And then I'm going to take 4 7/10 and now adjust this number line again. That's 4 7/10 is somewhere between 4 and 5. So this becomes 4 1/2. Where is 4 7/10? Well, I know that this 1/2 mark is also 4 5/10. So this is actually pretty close, a bit over, to 1/2 or 4 5/10. 4 7/10 is just a bit over 4 5/10 or 4 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and place 4 1/2 right up here. Now I've got 12 1/2, subtract 4 1/2. Of course, I subtract my halves, and that becomes 0. 12 subtract 4 is simply 8. So my answer for this is going to be, it's around 8. 8 miles difference. All right. Complete the problem is next. 3 problems. I want you to go ahead and estimate. Estimate each sum or difference by rounding to 0, 1/2, or 1. If you need to draw a number line, please do. If you know essentially where you're at in terms of the fraction and its closeness to 0, 1/2, or 1, then you don't need to. But here we have a sum and a difference that we need to contend with, and then we have a mixed number. Actually, 2 mixed numbers that we need to find the difference for, at least the estimate for. We'll see you in class.